All right. As some of you may know, I am originally from the great state of Ohio, and there's someone in the back, and our next speaker is from Ohio as well. And years ago, I met John Kasich when he was a congressman, in fact, my congressman when I was in Ohio, and I went to a fundraiser for him with my parents. And Governor, I have a picture here of you with my mother in the mid-1990s, and you haven't aged a bit. And as my father said, my mom looks great.
Oh my.
Not much at all. But John Kasich is currently the governor of the state of Ohio. He became governor in 2011. My parents are thrilled with him. He is the 69th governor. He was in Congress prior to that, and I think was a pretty strong leader there, and we all got to know him during that period of time. He took a little bit of time off from politics, but came back. In 2014, he won re-election by a huge margin, 30%, beating Ted Strickland, as I recall. And it's good to have Governor Kasich here with us today.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great to be here. Thank you. So let me tell you, I was here in New Hampshire back when I was a very young man, and I was thinking about running for president, and I have a fond memory of this. We used to do these coffees. Didn't do town halls because no one would show up, but we'd do these coffees. And I was in this lady's house, and I was standing in the kitchen with a lady, and we were communicating, and things were going just fantastic. We were talking about all kinds of things, and I'm thinking, I got this lady. She's going to support me if I decide finally to run for president. She looks at her watch, and she looks at me, and she says, "What time do you think the candidate's going to get here?" That's when I kind of knew it was over. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Some of you, I can renew for you who I am. I grew up in a little town outside of Pittsburgh called McKees Rocks, and it was a blue-collar, Democratic town. I mean, I never met a Republican until I went to college. In fact, they used to put roadblocks up to keep the Republicans out. They said my Uncle Harry was a Republican, but we didn't really listen to Uncle Harry. But it was an interesting place because if wind blew the wrong way, people found themselves out of work. My father was a mailman. My dad carried mail on his back for 29 years, delivered it to our home. His father was a coal miner. They didn't have a lot when my father was a kid. And his father would go to the coal mine, and then he would come home at night, and he wouldn't eat all of his lunch because he needed to share it with the kids. And my Uncle George told me that when they would eat their father's leftover lunch, it still tasted like the coal mine. Tough circumstance. My mother, very smart, very opinionated, kind of that's where I get it from, but never got the education she deserved. Her mother lived with us for a while, barely spoke English. But my mother and father told me when I was a kid, "Johnny, you can be anything you want to be. Never let anybody tell you what you can't be. You go become whatever you can." And I went to Ohio State. And I graduated from that school, and the next thing I knew, I was running for the state senate. I didn't have a single relative in the state of Ohio. People thought I was crazy, said, "You can't run and win." But I spent about 2 years at it. And I was running against an incumbent Democrat who was really a household word. He had a dam named after him in Columbus, and he took me for granted, and I sort of created the notion of grassroots door-to-door campaigning. And in that election, I was able to defeat that incumbent and enter the state senate at the age of 26. It was pretty remarkable. And then what happened was they took my district away. They wanted to kill me in the cradle. They didn't want me to go on any farther. So I decided to run for Congress. And so in 1982, I started my campaign for the United States Congress. Now in 1982, for those that think back, Ronald Reagan was not a very popular man. The interest rates were still high, the inflation was high, the employment was high. And when he came to Ohio in 1982, nobody really wanted to appear with him except for me. Because running for Congress, I was running on the Reagan record. let's cut taxes, let's shrink the government, let's balance the budget. And in 1982, running against an incumbent Democrat, I was the only Republican in America that year to defeat an incumbent Democrat in the United States of America. So it was a great win. Now, when I got there, what happened was I went on to the Armed Services Committee because they didn't have any other room for this 30-year-old. And so I immersed myself in national security issues. I was on the Armed Services Committee, and being on the Armed Services Committee meant that I had to take the resources of America and apply them to the threat that we faced as Americans. And that's precisely what I did. And in the course of that, of course, I was able to travel. So I went to the Soviet Union before the wall came down. What an eye-opening experience. And I remember when we left, when the plane took off the ground and we were headed back to America, everybody cheered. They said it would be that way, and it was just spontaneous. I was able to go to El Salvador. I was part of a delegation that President Reagan sent to El Salvador. And it was a remarkable experience. I had been in the Gulf, before the Gulf War, looking at our soldiers and talking to them about what we should do. So it was a series of things that I was able to do, and I was in Congress, by the way, for 18 years. Don't hold that against me. And then, after 6 years of being just on armed services, I got a call one night, and a person called me and said, John, you've just been selected to serve on the Budget Committee, which most of you would remember, for those that remember me at all. Well, I went on that Budget Committee, and I didn't go on it because I care about numbers. I went on it because the Budget Committee tells you how you run things, because I basically wanted to kind of run America. So I knew that getting my hands on that Budget Committee, we could make big changes. So I was excited. But then I quickly got frustrated when I saw that the politicians were not serious about restoring some fiscal discipline in the country. And I was in a gas station filling up my tank, complaining to somebody there, and a guy walked around the tanks and he saw me and he said, I've listened to you complain, but what are you going to do about it? So I flew down to Washington and I got my staff together, the 5 or 6 staffers I had, and I said, listen, we're going to write a budget for the United States of America. And they said, well, there's only 5 of us. And I said, I know we're overstaffed and we may get in each other's way, but I think we can do it. So we put together a budget for the United States of America. And in that year, President Bush had a budget, the Democrats had a budget, the Black Caucus had a budget, and John Kasich had a budget. And the vote on that budget that year was 405 to 30. I had the 30. So I walked back to my office and my staff was pretty upset. We'd put a lot of time in it. And I looked at them and I said, I don't know what you're all down about. We have 29 other people who think we know how to run the United States of America. We're just getting started. And so for the next 10 years of my life, I dedicated myself to getting to a balanced budget. The same way that I served on armed services, I committed myself to streamlining the Pentagon, to get the services to work together, and I was involved in some historic changes in the law. Well, in 1993, I jumped over 7 people more senior than me because every year I kept introducing budgets. My hometown newspaper said, you just keep getting shellacked. And I said, you know, if I'm only a lone wolf on the top of a mountain, as long as I'm sure in what I'm doing, it'll work. And you know what I found? The harder I worked, the more beatings I took, the bigger my group got to the people who supported what I wanted to do. So I jumped over these 7 people and became the senior Republican in '93 and wrote the alternative to Bill Clinton's tax increase. Well, it turns around in 1995, we win the majority. And John Kasich becomes the chairman of the Budget Committee. I'm going to finally get up that mountain. But we ended up in a government shutdown, and I was part of it. And the reason I was part of it is because the Clinton administration wanted to use smoke and mirrors to get to a balanced budget. And my mother and father told me, when you're in politics, you do the right thing. Don't play games. The government opened up again. The administration approached me and Senator Domenici, and we sat down in secret for a number of months, and we wrote the blueprint for the '97 budget agreement. Get this, folks, after 10 years, we passed that agreement. And for the first time since man walked on the moon, we had a balanced budget in America. We paid down the largest amount of the publicly held debt in America. We cut the taxes on capital gains. We were in balance. We had a projected $5 trillion surplus, and America was humming economically. So the 10 years of work actually came true. So I had this ill-fated effort to travel around and see if people would want me. I was a young man, and here in New Hampshire, they said, "We like you, but come back another day." So I left politics, just walked away from it. And you know, I had this $5 trillion surplus, and I went back to Columbus, my hometown, and one of my buddies said to me, "Hey, John, you got to understand something. Now that you and your friends are gone, they're going to blow the surplus." I said, "You can't blow $5 trillion. You got to wake up every day trying to figure out how to spend it." Yeah. And the Republicans spent it all and then some and put us back in the hole. What a tragedy. Now, I'm out of politics 10 years. I did a lot of different things. I worked at Lehman Brothers and traveled the country as a business person. I served on corporate boards. And you might recall that I was a huge television star on Fox News, okay, where I substituted for the low-key Bill O'Reilly. So, you know, in life, the Lord calls us for certain things. My dad and mom, simple blue-collar folks. Their son became a member of the legislature, the United States Congress, working with presidents, including Ronald Reagan. I had a great career out of politics, and I felt the call. Take the skills, young man, and go and apply them to your state. So I ran for governor, and I won, and I beat another incumbent Democrat, and it was narrow. Now, let me tell you, when I won, I faced some of the hardest times the state ever had. We were $8 billion in the hole, which was almost 20% of our general revenue fund. We had lost 350,000 private sector jobs. We had 89 cents in our rainy day fund, literally. And people said there was no way up, and our credit was at risk. So I won the election, and I had no time for politics. I really haven't, throughout my lifetime, had a lot of reason to practice politics, take a poll, finger in the air. And we went to work at reinventing the government of the state of Ohio. Some people said you have to raise taxes. I said, well, that's like having a restaurant with no customers, so you say the answer is to raise prices. I said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to reduce our overhead, we're going to remake the state, and we're going to lower the prices. And we went to work and brought massive change. At the end of my first year, my approval rating was 28%. You got to work to be that unpopular, okay? But it didn't bother me, because I wasn't in that business to be popular. I was in that business to try to fix the state. 4 years later, where are we today? We went from 350,000 lost jobs to a gain of 340,000 jobs over the period of the last 4 years. We went from $8 billion in the hole. We now are running a $2 billion surplus. We've cut taxes by the most amount of any state in America, $3 billion, and we killed the death tax, and we have made significant tax relief for small businesses in the state of Ohio. Okay, so our credit has been restored, and as all this has happened, ladies and gentlemen, as we become more prosperous, when the state becomes more prosperous, it's almost like a mom and dad. When mom and dad do well, the kids do better. In my state, as we've done better, we have not ignored those who find themselves in harm's way. If you have a developmentally disabled child, we're going to help you. If you know somebody who is drug addicted, we're going to treat you. Because just putting you in prison and release you and having you back and forth and not dealing with your addiction doesn't make any sense. If you're mentally ill, we don't think you ought to live in our prisons. We have 10,000 Ohioans that are in our prisons who have mental illness. That's just immoral. So we're trying to treat the mentally ill. And for the working poor, we want the working poor to be able to advance without being hurt because they're trying harder to earn more money and be penalized for it. Now, let me just tell you, as it applies to the mentally ill or the drug addicted and the working poor, we're also reforming welfare. Because we want to get you out of the ditch and on your feet. And then we expect personal responsibility out of you so you can walk and you can realize your God-given purpose. Now, I was 28% approval, and we had an election here just last November. In Ohio, the swingiest swing state in America. Well, how'd Kasich do? I won 86 out of 88 counties. Barack Obama won Cuyahoga County by 40 points, and I carried it. I won 26% of the African American vote, 51% of the vote for union households, and 60% of the vote from women. And my approval rating today is the same as my disapproval rate, as my popularity was at 28%. Now it's 28% that don't like me and 60-some do. What's the lesson? Ohio's doing better. I'm not going to go to Connecticut, but maybe in a campaign, you never know. But here's the thing I want you to know. Why has it happened? One, people feel the improvement in the economy and hope to get a job. And number two, everyone in our state. Well, not everyone, but most people now, if you're in the minority, if you have a drug problem, if you have a problem with mental illness, we're going to include you. Because as Ohio does better, we need to lift everyone. Because if you lift everyone, you give everyone hope. So what's the lesson of leadership? No polls, no focus groups, no consultants in the back room telling you what to do or what to say, none of that. You as a leader need to know what you're for. And you need to build a team around you who supports what it is that you're for. And then you need to take that message out and get people who don't even agree with you to see the purpose, the high moral purpose behind what you're doing. In our country today, we're broken. You know, we've got severe problems, as we all know. That's why we gather here. We can't figure out what to do about immigration. We can't balance our budget. We're heading to $20 trillion in debt. We can't figure out how to lower the corporate tax so companies invest here and create jobs rather than in Europe. We can't figure out what to do with our infrastructure. Do you realize when all that is going on, it shows that we are confused in the eyes of our friends and it emboldens our enemies. But let's get a little bit more down to earth. When we can't do these things, our children pay, our grandchildren pay, our families are hurt, our communities are hurt, our state is hurt, and so is our country. You see, folks, what I have learned throughout my career in balancing a budget in '97, working with the administration after a shutdown, what I've learned in Ohio, bringing people together, we're all in our silos. You can't run anything from a silo. What we have to do is to realize that we can stand on principle, yet we can solve problems in America. Because if we can deal with our borders and our immigration problem, if we can begin to balance our budget and deal with entitlements in a fair but direct way, if we can reduce the corporate tax because we all work together, if we can solve our infrastructure problems, guess what happens? America regains its strength. And I have to tell you, folks, in this time, a weak America doesn't get it. In this time, we need a strong America to send a message to our enemies and also to send a message to our strength that America is back. And this can be done. I did it in Washington. It's happened in Ohio. And my only goal and my only purpose is to build a stronger situation for the people that I serve. And that's why I wanted to come here today to tell you this story. Foreign policy experience, actually success in Washington, in historic change, changing Ohio and having people say, pretty good guy, not perfect, pretty good guy. Whether I run for president or not, I want you to think about this, because Ohio is a microcosm of America. We wait 3 days for the election results from Ohio. I won almost 64% of the vote. The issue of solving problems and bringing people together and leaving no one behind will only result in a stronger America. That doesn't mean we don't stand on principle. But when we stand on principle, we don't demonize our adversaries and our opponents. We don't want to poison those wells, because at the end of the day, remember, we may be here as Republicans. They may be down the street as Democrats. But you know what unites us? We're Americans. God bless America. Thank you. Thank you.
Governor, we have time for a couple quick questions. Anyone on this side? Right back there.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Stacy from Manchester. My question to you is, what are your thoughts on privacy?
I'm all for it. I mean, I am concerned about privacy, and not just from the government, but it seems like if we go to a grocery store, they know where we're walking, what aisle we're walking down. I have friends in the software business, and I told them one of the keys for all of us is the great invention would be one that would protect my privacy in light of all these electronic devices and all this digital work that goes on in this country. In terms of the federal government, you know, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we have courts that are in a position to protect us when government wants to come into our lives. But there has to be a balance on privacy, of course, against security, because we can't have lone wolves in this country like we've seen in Europe who are intent on coming and destroying our people. But fundamentally, we're free, we need to be free, and privacy is such an integral part of it. So I don't know what else I can say, but we can talk, and I'm with you. And if you got any software, I'm going to buy it from you.
And Governor, we have the last question right here.
Governor, I was originally from Ohio, Dayton, Ohio. And,
Move back.
What's that? Move back,
move
yes.
back.
That's what my parents keep telling me. They're still there. And my wife and I had the pleasure to meet you the last time back when you were here thinking about running a few years back. And we got to see all the great things that you accomplished then and since then. So a lot of us are now, feeling the pressure to get behind one of the many candidates that are running. And while it seems early to some out there, it's actually not so early, and I'm wondering what is between here and your decision as to whether you will run again.
Let me, you want me to run again? I hear you. You know what? I'm trying to figure out what the Lord wants me to do with my life. He has a purpose for everyone in this room. I want to fulfill my purpose. Life is short. The next world, I'll be accountable for what I did here. I got 2 sweet 15-year-old twin girls, a beautiful wife. I got to consider all that and my friends. And at the end of the day, if I feel this is my call, I will come back again and again and again. And in the meantime, I'm not going to change my message. I'm not going to ignore people in need. I want them to get on their feet. I'm not going to ignore the tough choices that this country needs to make without regard to polls or focus groups. See, I'm free. I like myself. I'm not heading into some, political calculation here, ladies and gentlemen. Isn't it great to be free, to do what you want and say what you want, and be respectful for those who may disagree. I'm a fighter. I can fight with the best of them. I could come in here and spend this whole speech just blasting Barack Obama and all this other stuff. It's not what I wanted to do. I want us as a party. We're needed. We're needed with our conservative government as a last resort, not as a first resort. Power from the bottom up, power to the people in the neighborhoods. But we got to win. And we're not going to win if we just feel good about ourselves and don't take this message of unity across this great country. I'm so glad I grew up in McKees Rocks, where I saw people who struggled, blue collar, middle class, ethnic, because it's in my mind's eye. And it's about fairness, and it's about growth. So think about me, would you? Don't commit too soon. Let us all have a chance to breathe and get out and And you know what I really look forward to? Being out in your homes again. Letting you get to know me and see me. That's what it's really all about. It's why I love New Hampshire and I love to be here. Thank you all and God bless.